Hi Dragonflies, welcome back to Dragonfly Spirit Studio. I'm Lynn Bauer. I'm back with another postcard paint along. In the last video we did a postcard plan along where I illustrated how the planning process might work if you were going to design a holiday card of your own. In this video, I took that planning process a little farther for myself and tried to see if I could plan a holiday postcard based on a concept that I've had in mind for a while, but I wasn't sure I could pull off: a lighted Christmas tree at night. And I'm still not sure I can pull it off, at least not in any given draft. Now, that's always true for a watercolor. They just don't always turn out, and sometimes you just have to start on a fresh sheet of paper. It's just the nature of the beast with watercolor. But it's especially true when you're doing something that has a lot of spattering or wet into wet techniques. Just because I'm working on a postcard doesn't mean that the spattered dots magically make themselves be closer together, or that the paint decides to move a smaller amount when I drop it onto wet paper. So when you're doing wet into wet techniques and spattering, if you find that you're struggling to make this work at postcard size, one tip that may help is to scale up a little bit. Try working 5x7 or 6x9. Something that's slightly larger than a postcard might be a little easier. And then if it turns out, perhaps you can turn it into a larger card to put in an envelope to mail. So let's have a look at what you'll need to do this holiday postcard, and then we'll get started trying to paint a postcard of a lighted Christmas tree at night. To paint this holiday postcard, you'll need your usual watercolor supplies. A pencil for making some planning marks will be handy. The technique that we're going to use for the trees is easiest with a liner or rigger. That's the long, skinny brush like this for making linear marks, but you can use the point of a round if you don't have a rigger. You'll need something to make small droplets of water, so you may be able to find a spray bottle that produces these little droplets if you only depress the plunger part way. So you're looking for a pattern like this, little droplets of water instead of a mist. Unfortunately, there is not one on the market that I'm aware of that produces them at the right size for postcards. There are a few that do larger paintings, make bigger droplets. So you have to search around amongst the spray bottles that you have in your house and see if you can find one that will do it. If that doesn't work and you can't find one, an alternative is to use a piece of plastic needlepoint canvas. This allows you to make little droplets by adding some water, which gets suspended in the little holes, and then when you blow through it, you can spatter little droplets. There we go. As you can see, this didn't produce as many droplets as the spray bottle, so it's a little bit more work, but it's very controllable and reliable, so that's an alternative if you can't find a spray bottle that works. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is make a few planning marks to indicate where the main trunks of my trees are going to be. So I have this very rough sketch that I've made. This is my planning sketch, and I've indicated what steps I'm going to do my painting to remind me what order to do things in. But I do want to place the trunks of my trees on my postcard ahead of time. So I'm going to just make a little vertical pencil mark, and I'm going to make mine dark so that you can see them on the video. But you would probably want to make yours just dark enough that you can see them. And then I'm going to have kind of a hillside behind my trees that goes up on the right. So I'm going to make a little dotted line to indicate where my snowy hillside goes behind my trees. All right, so now we're going to begin our process by spattering and then negative painting around the trees, but we need to have everything mixed ahead of time because when this process begins, we're working against the clock. There's a time limit on how long we can work with this spray and spatter process before the droplets start sinking into the paper and the paper starts to become more uniformly wet. So another tool that you may want to have available just in case is a hairdryer. A hairdryer can be a great way to freeze the action when you're doing wet into wet techniques. If you are looking at the technique and you think that looks great the way it is, but it's still pretty wet, it's going to soften more as it dries. So instead of allowing that to happen slowly over time, I can grab my hairdryer and stop the action right away where I want it. So the first thing we need to do actually is mix up our dark wash for the sky and the shadows in the snowy hillside. And I have to keep in mind that I'm going to be putting this onto wet paper, so it's going to get diluted as I put it out. And I think that's about the strength that I want it, but I don't want it to be this bright blue. I want a somewhat more muted blue. So to mute my blue, I'm going to do my usual and gray it down. This is ultramarine blue. I'm going to gray it down with some burnt sienna. Burnt sienna, everything that we call a brown, is really a somewhat grayed orange. Blue and orange are complements, so if I add some burnt sienna to it, now I get a nice sort of indigo blue, and that's what I'm looking for. The next thing I'm going to do, the first actual step in my painting, is going to be to get those little droplets uniformly over the page so that I have a base of droplets all over the place, and then I'm going to spatter. And that means that when my little spattered droplets hit, they're going to spread out a little bit along those little droplets instead of making little dots. So I can do this with my spray bottle, or I can do this with my needlepoint canvas. So I've got a pattern of some droplets and some dry paper in between. And now it's time to spatter. And I'm going to spatter with just whatever colors I want, because this is sort of representing the little bits of color from the colored lights on my trees. Now I have to be careful. If I get too carried away here, I'm going to wind up with all of this running together. And if you notice that that's starting to happen, what you can do is dry it, then sprinkle it again and start over instead of continuing on this pass. So if you want to, you can make multiple passes to get your colored lights established. So right now it looks like a mess, right? And that's okay. The next thing we're going to do is negative paint around the tree shapes themselves where the branches would be coming out with just some water. I'm not really trying to, or I'm going to put a little color in it so you can see it. I'm not really trying to paint my night sky yet. I'm trying to establish where my trees are. So I'm going to come up to my trees and sort of carve in around them. And at the same time, I'm kind of absorbing some of those colored droplets, which is fine. So that would be the outer branches of my tree. And now I have to come in and do the outer branches on this side, but also the outer branches of this one. So I have to kind of work back and forth here. And it may be that they kind of run into each other at the bottom, so I'm going to stop right there. So I know it doesn't look like much yet, that's okay. And I'm going to add some of the shadowing in the snow. So at this point, I need to let things dry. I can get my hairdryer out and dry it, or I can go do something else for a while and come back, and then we can continue with the second step. All right, this is dry now, but before I continue, I'm going to take a damp cloth and wipe off some of these spatters along the outside, because that's very distracting visually and it makes it hard for me to see what I'm doing. All right. So now you'll see one of the reasons why I used just a pale wash back there to start establishing the trees. I didn't do a great job with this one here. This tree is kind of misshapen, but that's okay, because when I come back with my darker color, this will sort of become like a shadow of this tree. So I think it's going to work out anyway, and we're going to continue with this draft. Now for the next step, I'm going to use my rigger and my spray bottle, or use your needlepoint canvas if you don't have the spray bottle that works. And now we're going to establish the shadowy areas of the tree, kind of around the trunk and on the underside of the branches. And we want them again to have that kind of needle-like texture, so I'm going to use my spray bottle again. This time I'm mostly worrying about getting droplets around the tree areas themselves. And then I'm going to take my rigger and drag it through, trying to touch mostly the tip, and create the center trunk and some of the shadowing that you would see underneath the branches. So to get that center part of the tree established. And then a little bit of the shadow of this tree on the snow. And then I'll do the next one. Okay, we're back for the final step, I hope. I'm going to, once again, spritz the whole page, try to get those tiny droplets over the entire page, and now it's time to put in my actual darks. I need to work quickly here, because if I wait too long, the droplets start to sink into the paper, and I don't get the look that I want. So I'm not going all the way up to the white. I'm going to leave a little bit of that colored area around to be the part of the tree that's sort of turning into the shadow, into the dark. So that kind of separates some of the outer silhouette. And what I'm going to do now is let some of those outer shadows connect into the center of the tree. And now I need to do the shadow area of the snow. This is actually starting to dry down here, but that may be okay because I don't want this to be as bright a white. So what I'm going to do is rinse my brush and take just the rinse water, fill in some of these areas down here in the snow. So there's little patches of light. I'm going to leave a few of them close to the trees where the lights from the trees might be shining on the snow, and then mostly soften them out when I get farther away from the trees. It's not bad. The temptation is to go in and start fiddling with the trees, and at this point you want to avoid doing that. If you're going to be fiddling, the place to be fiddling would be to eliminate a few more of the bright whites in the snow. You probably don't want too many of those very far away from your trees, because the farther away from the tree lights that you go, the less reflection there would be on the snow. But that's not too bad. I'm going to dry that and have a look at it after it's dry and see what I think. Now again, before I start thinking about evaluating this painting, I need to get rid of all the distractions around the outside by cleaning up my tape a little bit. That's actually not too bad. I'm really kind of surprised it turned out as well as it did. I'm not sure I'm wild about the bright colors out here in the snow. So since it didn't take very long and I do have some wash left, I think I'm going to try a second one. Why not? Okay, here are our two attempts, and I think there are some things about this one I like better and some things about this one I like better. Also, I notice on this one, if I look at just the trees, they've got a bit more of a glow to them, a bit more of a misty look. And I think that's because I went a little too dark in the centers of these trees. So what I'm going to do is take a paper towel and get it wet. And where I have a place that I think is just a bit on the dark side, like up here, I'm going to press it down on the page and rock my finger back and forth. I do not want to scrub at all. You see I take just a little bit of color off that way. And then to avoid transferring that color, I'm going to move my finger somewhere else on the paper towel. Do the same thing. I press and I rock just a little bit. I don't want to smudge it. I just want to lighten it up just a teensy bit. This allows me in a very controlled way to just soften it slightly. And now I like that a bit better. Temptation is to do too much. I think that I should stop fooling with it before I wreck it. So I'm going to say that one's done. I by no means feel like I have mastered this technique or figured out all the details, but it's definitely a technique that I want to keep working on and trying to exploit. So I might do some more examples of this. And even though neither one of these is really perfect, they're both fine for a postcard to convey the idea of a lighted Christmas tree outside at night in the snow. And I'm actually kind of surprised. I didn't think it would be possible to even get this close. So I'm pretty happy with these. I'm going to keep playing with it. I hope you will too. Happy holidays, everybody, and I'll see you next time.